Good evening and happy Thursday, and that means Tropical Thursdays are back. I'm Chief Meteorologist Noel Ream.
And I'm Dr. Athena Masson.
Let's get to a few weather headlines, at least in the tropics. We're going to take a look at the Western Pacific. We've got a few disturbances in the Central and Eastern Pacific we want to talk about, and also potential tropical development in the Western Caribbean.
It is the one basin that's a little bit on fire even, but still slightly less active. Right here we have Tropical Storm Krosa just off of the west coast of Japan, and this is right in the Sea of Japan as it's moving very slowly to the north. Over the next few days it could pose a threat to Hokkaido and even further up towards Russia.
Right.
But it did enter through the southern islands of Japan all the way down here just a few days ago. Large amounts of flash flooding as well as landslides. Only one death though, and very impressive with that. But Japan, they have seen hurricanes frequently. It's a year-round hurricane season there. It's not confined to what we see in the Atlantic. So hurricanes can occur any time of the year. So for them, they're always prepared.
And it's been holding on for quite some time. We were talking about this in our last Tropical Thursday segment. So unfortunately, it's still there. It's going to pose a threat to maybe some land, but it looks like it eventually will come to an end over the next few days. Meanwhile, we also got Lakima out there with winds up to 40 miles per hour, nearly stationary right now.
Yes, and this one's been a record breaker in many ways. Down by the Ryukyu Islands just a few days ago, and this has been all over Facebook as well as Twitter, when it was equated to that of a Category 3 storm. It was known as a super typhoon over in the Western Pacific Hurricane Basin, but as it was approaching these islands, it underwent an eye wall replacement cycle. So what that means pretty much is that it's like an onion for these hurricanes. So you'll see the extreme outer layers of this eye wall start to reform, and it kind of strengthens a little bit more, but you'll see it wobble ever so slightly. So it moved away from the Ryukyu Islands from a direct hit, but still major destruction within those islands. But also, when it did hit mainland China, equated to a Category 2 hurricane, it was the second costliest typhoon to ever hit China.
That's incredible. What you'll usually see is the eye wall replaces itself, so it becomes from a small eye wall to a larger eye wall, and in that process it actually starts to downgrade just a bit, but as it finally gets that eye wall replacement completed, you'll see that hurricane or typhoon begin to strengthen. Moving forward, we want to talk about what's going on in the eastern and the central parts of the Pacific right now. We're looking at a disturbance right here with only about a 10% chance of development over the next 2 days and even the next 5 days. Not going to keep a close eye on that one. We will maybe within the next few days if this circulation continues to get a little bit stronger and tighter.
So right now, 10% chance of development. Not really doing well cyclonic-wise. It is moving from the central Pacific over off into the western Pacific, now entering into an area of minimal wind shear. So slight 20% chance of development over the next several days, but likely this probably won't hold on for very much longer.
In parts of the Atlantic, we got a Bermuda high pressure which has resituated itself, and what's actually going on now is it has obviously a clockwise rotation in an anticyclonic flow, and what it's doing is it's actually bringing some flooding rain continuing across the state of Florida. They've been getting pounded with showers and thunderstorms for the last several days. They had flash flood watches earlier this afternoon.
And what we do not want to see is when this Bermuda high pressure moves very closely to the continental United States. If it moves closer to us, that means if a disturbance forms all the way down here by the equator and starts moving this way, there's not enough space for it to miss the continental U.S. Instead, this high pressure will push it right into Florida, or it may follow that Gulf Stream path, and the Carolinas could be impacted.
And this is why this time of year is a very active hurricane season. As we go ahead taking a look at your tropical futurecast, we want to debunk what's going on. It's been circulating across the internet right now. Long-term futurecast models, GFS and Euro models, have been showing what could be our next tropical system, which will be developing in the far western Caribbean. Models have a very hard time pinpointing exactly what will happen even in a 2 to 3 day period. So this is what's going on right now according to, I'm going to go ahead and let Athena explain a little bit more about our model range forecast.
So looking at any sort of model range forecast, the closer that you are to an event taking place, the more reliable that we're really on to our forecast, and that is correct. So short range, 1 to 3 days out, prepare for impacts, watch your forecast very closely. And as we start to lengthen that time even further, now looking at a medium range, 4 to 6 days out, for sure, monitor the forecast, be a little bit concerned, prepare for any changes though, but it's always just safe to be prepared no matter what the situation.
Absolutely.
And then now you're looking at long range, 7 to 9 days. That's a very long time in order for you to prepare, to look at the forecast, but also view it with skepticism. Hurricane Florence, which hit the Carolinas just last year, and about 6 to 7 days out, the National Hurricane Center was already putting that cone of uncertainty. And when it hit, it was only 2 miles away from that point that the National Hurricane Center was saying it would come ashore. So 2 miles of a difference. That's incredible. It just goes to show long range. Yes, viewed with skepticism, but our forecasting techniques getting so much better as the years progress.
Taking a look at our sea surface temperatures, we're talking about nearly bath water out there along the Florida coastline, 86 to 88 degree waters out towards the Florida Keys, nearly 90 degrees out there right now. South of Cuba, we're talking about 89 to 90 degrees as well, 83 degrees. More rain cooled in nature.
And with that front that just pushed through western Texas and now pushing out into the Gulf of Mexico, it's stalled right along this boundary here. So with that fresh water coming down in precipitation form, it is cooling the surface. But regardless of how much rain and how long that stationary front remains over there, 83 degrees, we need at least 80-degree temperatures for sea surface temperatures in order for a tropical storm to continue to grow and evolve. And
we also have to keep in mind that not only do we need prime temperatures to get tropical development, we also need a minimal amount of wind shear taking place. And right now we do have quite a bit of wind shear across much of the Gulf of Mexico, which could prohibit that development that we showed you earlier, that long-range model forecast from the GFS that has something trying to situate itself out towards the Western Caribbean and trying to track northward for parts of the Gulf of Mexico.
So looking at cyclone frequency, we are in August, mid-August at this point, and that's when we start to see a huge spike in activity across the North Atlantic basin. So August 1st, just reaching that point where we're starting to see a trending upwards of this graph here. And September all the way to October, those are our peak months. Now for Texas, once again, a reminder that the peak hurricane month is August. Generally when we see the most tropical storms, hurricanes, and major hurricanes hit the Texas coastline. For the rest of the Atlantic basin, it's the month of September as a whole.
We're going to go ahead and wrap up what we had earlier tonight. Western Pacific slightly active, 2 areas of interest right now, a few areas of interest remaining in the central and eastern parts of the Pacific, and we'll let Athena take away the last one.
And potential tropical development in the Western Caribbean over the next few days, 6 to 7 days. It's still very far out. We cannot make any conclusions, but we are watching that area very closely.
Thank you for joining us on Tropical Thursdays. We hope to see you back here next Thursday for our next weekly segment.